Revolution Radio, where information never sleeps.
You called down the thunder, well now you got it.
Red, you tell them I'm coming, and hell's coming with me, you hear? Hell's coming with me!
Revolution Radio. The opinions expressed on this radio station, its programs, and its website by the hosts, guests, and call-in listeners or chatters are solely the opinions of the original source who expressed them. They do not necessarily represent the opinions of Revolution Radio and FreedomSlips.com, its staff, or affiliates. You're listening to Revolution Radio, FreedomSlips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host.
Good evening, folks. This is Diamond with the Oppenheimer Ranch Project, bringing you another edition of The Inconvenient Truth, prepping for the Grand Solar Minimum. We have our guest, Lee Wheelbarger, back for the third week in a row tonight to talk about preparedness and the upcoming shift on our planet, as well as my partner, Leah Shaper. Guys, thanks for joining us. Before we get into tonight's show, I think that tonight we want to be discussing... for the general public, we're going to pick Lee's brain on what Lee knows. Now, we had Anita Bailey on here for the month of March covering her book, Prepping for the Grand Solar Minimum, Cold Times, and we learned the perspective of someone who has a PhD in preparedness and what she's doing to survive and thrive. Her specialty is in, small animal production and stockpiling in specific ways. Now, Lee Wheelbarger has a different perspective coming from a military background. The guy is basically a Renaissance man in my eyes. He is a military electronics systems specialist. He has an inventor, inventing one of the first, I believe, night vision goggle setups decades ago. Chief engineer and regatta director on the Electric Blue Solar Yacht Project and America's Solar Boat Cup. So tonight we're going to be picking Lee Wheelbarger's brains on the things that Lee thinks is important for the Grand Solar Minimum, for preparedness, and for you guys to survive and thrive in the future. So let's join our guests and welcome Leah. Are you there?
Yes, I am.
Awesome. Lee, can you hear me?
Yes, sir, I can. Thank you very much for having me.
Yeah, you're welcome. Now, Lee is under the weather today. He has a little bit of cold. Apparently, he's not taking the cannabis medicine. But we'll get to that in a second. Lee, the first thing I want to put out there that we could talk about in the first hour, and this is coming from Don, our carpenter here at the Oppenheimer Ranch Project, is what are your top 5 things that you think are Lee Wheelbarger's most important things when it comes to preparedness? And these could be ideas, concepts, anything, any way you want to bring it down. What are your top 5 things? Could be guns. I don't know, Lee, where you're going. Could be a cistern of water in the woods. But the top 5 things that you would recommend everyone focus on.
Beans, bullets, Band-Aids, communications, and weapon systems and power. Or communications. So that would pretty much be, if you have all of those, you're pretty much set to go. And in the beans, water is number 1. A clean supply of water that is, always forthcoming. Not from the city, not from any municipality or anything of that nature. It's got to be water you got to be able to get out of the ground yourself. And, after that, water purification, because, next to air, water is the most important thing. So that should always be number 1 on everybody's list.
Amen. Now, we just had a guy tonight. I haven't even checked we had excavators out here. We have a guy putting in our 3rd cistern, which is not our last cistern. This is one that's further out in the property, maybe a quarter mile from the main house, but more hidden, and another 2,000 gallons in the ground. The reason I think we need multiple cisterns, in my opinion, is in the event of a large volcanic eruption, when we could have, harmful particulates toxifying the runoff in the groundwater for a short period of time, or even a long duration event. What are your feelings on cisterns, Lee?
I like cisterns. My preferred way to do that is with a windmill, and then have that windmill feed those cisterns. And so you have a tank where the windmill is. It fills that tank. That tank feeds through gravity feed other tanks that you have on the same plane. So you just get yourself a surveyor out there and try to shoot your grades. And then you can use the excess water for irrigation in all of your systems. And it's a sealed system. So, all of your tanks are full of water, and you've got filters on them so you don't get bugs and animals and everything else in them. And you've always got access hatches to be able to get in them and clean them out. But I think that's a great idea. And, put them below ground so you don't have to deal with the freezing nearly as bad, although they still can if it gets cold enough.
Yeah.
And then you have filters coming out of the what comes out of the ground. So as the pump is pumping, have it go through a carbon filter just to make sure that there's nothing in that, and then run it into your pipes, and then that will go to all of your different storage tanks, and then you can irrigate with that. You can water your animals. You've got water for bathing, so on and so forth, and then you filter it again before any drinking water. And then when you filter it the second time, you prefer to have a much better filter on it. That way, if it gets contaminated by anything within the system, it's still filtered out.
So once I have these clean tanks in the ground and they're connected, I don't have experience with this, but I do have a tank that we've had for several years, and I just moved it from one location to the other, and I need to clean it. How often, when I set this pristine system of cisterns in the ground, how often will I have to go into those hatches and power wash it out or clean it out?
I normally clean mine twice a year.
Okay.
Because that's drinking water. So, and I go in with a pressure washer and pressure wash everything out. And then after I've pressure washed it out and I've got it nice and clean, then I go back through with a little bit of bleach in some water and plenty of ventilation inside there. I've got a fan blowing in to keep fresh air going in it. And then I go in and I scrub it all down with a scrub brush. And I do that. You can do it once a year if you want, but I recommend, if you want it pristine, clean, twice a year. And it only takes, they're not very big tanks. It only takes about an hour, so it's not a big thing. You just pick a Saturday and go to it.
Sweet. Leah, do you want to chime in on water storage?
Yeah. So I'm thinking that, with filters, one of the challenges is going to be getting filters in the future. So perhaps we should talk about backup methods of sanitizing water. Like, for instance, we could use, a little cap full of bleach. We can use iodine. And I'm wondering if you have any thoughts about that, Lee.
I make them myself. You can get activated charcoal and so on and so forth, all the materials. There's all kinds of directions online on YouTube and Wikipedia on how you can make an activated charcoal filter. And Excellent. So you can just buy the materials. And when I do it in a clear PVC plastic. And that way you can actually see when the filter's dirty, and you can make them bigger or smaller, or whatever is best for you to get all the particulate and everything out of it. Then you can use electricity to make denatured water, and of course boiling the water to get anything out of it. We're not dealing with a nuclear type of event, so we don't have to worry about things like that in the water, but viruses and bacteria and so on and so forth in the water can be a real issue. That's why I highly recommend filtering your water. If you don't know the source, it's got to be filtered.
Yeah, indeed. Now we're installing also an above ground water system with multiple ponds, and this is for direct irrigation and also for added wildlife and biodiversity for our property. The excavator, I wonder if you know anything about this. In order to seal these dams and ponds, they use a product called PAM, or Damn It, which is like a white powder that you sprinkle on the edges. Do you know about that, Lee? And have you used a product like that?
Yes. And there's actually a couple of different ways that you can do that, and I was going to reference those. So clay is a primary liner to put into dams because the water doesn't penetrate through it as well as it would a regular soil. If you don't have clay in your area, you can use the material that your excavator is talking about using, and you just spread that lightly around as a layer or barrier, and then you can put more dirt on top of that. So if you have livestock in there, they're not punching down through. Now, the redneck way is, if you don't have all kinds of money and you don't have access to that, is you can go and buy large sheets of thick milled plastic from Lowe's or Walmart or wherever you can get a thick milled plastic. And then you can go in with duct tape and duct tape those together, overlapping, and then duct taping them down, putting them in the bottom of the pond. And then you want to put another layer of dirt on top of that. That's about a foot or two thick. That's so if you walk around in there, you're not punching holes in it with your shoes or any animals or what have you. And then you can fill that up and use that as a liner to keep it from absorbing down through the soil. So if you have to make a ready, quick pond and store water, like, it's going to rain and, there's going to be water running down from here and you want to catch some water, that's a quick, easy way. You just, dig a little ditch off of where the ditch is going to be and you put this plastic in the bottom. It also works really well if you have an area where, say, you're in a rural location and there's a stream that's going down, and you want to have a water hole that you can always get water out of, or get fish into it. So what we used to do is we would get milk jugs and make a little wooden crate and attach the milk jugs to the wooden crate, and we would hook a long rope to that crate and we would tie it upstream. And so we would pull the crate upstream with the rope, fill it up with rocks that were in the river, and then just let go of it, and it would float downstream to where the dam was. And the guys at the dam would just take the rocks out and start damming them up. And then when we would get it almost all the way up to the height that we wanted the dam to be, then we would put our plastic in the water at the base of the dam and start putting rocks on it. And we would just keep rolling it up to the top of the dam and keep putting rocks on top of it and cover it over so it looks like a natural dam, but the water doesn't flow through it. It will always hold that water level even if the river goes down. So that's another quick way to make a nice solid dam across a river that doesn't wash out very well.
Using Lee's hillbilly trash bag duct tape method.
There you
like
go.
Using a pond liner, but much cheaper than a pond liner.
Yes,
what a way to go, because it's doing the same thing, and these are materials that we'll have sitting around. We're not going to have access to pond liners.
Right. Yeah, but like a tarp or, anything like that, you can put onto it. And you can take a tarp and, put it down in canvas tarps. A lot of those are waterproof. If they're not, you can rub wax on them and waterproof them up and put them in. And that's kind of like permanent when you do it with a tarp. It'll be there a long, long time. You can get years out of it unless you've got like a really bad flood or something.
Any other thoughts, Leah, on water?
I am actually wondering and obviously this requires power, but I'm wondering what you think of the idea of UV filters.
Well, UV doesn't get rid of everything. It's a good thing, and you can do UV. These light-emitting diodes, and I can't remember off the top of my head. I think it's 420 nanometers is the frequency of light that you want to use. Don't quote me on that, but it's pretty close, I think. But anyway, you can look up UV disinfecting stations, and they'll tell you the frequency of light. You can purchase the LEDs and put them in. It doesn't get rid of toxins and chemicals and things of that nature that are in the water. And so if you've got pollutants that are in the water, that can make you sick, whereas that the filter would pull that out in most cases.
Yeah, and if you're talking severely polluted water, the best way to do that is to boil it and catch the steam in a condensation catchment and run it down the sides and actually drink condensed water, recondensed water, because that will take the toxins out. Do you have an easy way of doing that on a large scale, Lee?
Just doing it through, running it through a filter, and you do the filter for the size, whatever your requirements are. But most people don't require that much water a day. So, a smaller scale system that is portable is going to be, better for you. And one of the things I wanted to talk about this evening, because I've been thinking about this show since last week, is a bug out vehicle. Because people, not everybody can stay where they are. Okay.
Yep.
And so, I'm a military guy, so we use acronyms for everything. So we call them BOMS. And that stands for a bug out mobile or a bug out modified bus. And the modified bus is, in my opinion, is the best way to go, because you have a large fuel tank and you have a lot of area that you can do things with inside of it. So if you're going to go that way and get a bus, the first thing you want to do is to take the rear end out of it as far as the differential gear, and you want to increase the ratio of that by 30%. And that's because buses aren't made to run at high speeds down the road, and so they get very, very poor gas mileage. The trick is, if you can get the bus to move at 70 miles an hour and be tacking less than 2,000 RPM, you'll start getting some decent gas mileage out of it. Plus, it won't wear out your engine prematurely. And the bus itself has plenty of horsepower, so increasing the ratio of the rear end by just 30% is not going to be a big deal for low end power and torque. So the bus, and especially with the internationals, you'll have plenty of power for the bus to be able to still operate. So after you pick out your bus, you definitely want your bus to have less than 10,000 hours on the engine. So when you purchase the bus, the newer buses that have a digital display or so on and so forth, you can see that on. I prefer older buses. They have less electronics, and you definitely want a bus that does not have an electronic fuel pump on it. So get yourself a bus without an electronic fuel pump, and then on the alternator, it'll be a pad mount type alternator. I recommend a CE Niehoff alternator as opposed to a Leestville or a Delco or what have you. And so you put the alternator on it. You want a high output alternator on it, and then you want to have two separate sets of batteries on the bus. One set is your bus batteries for starting the bus and the bus lights and so on and so forth. The other set is your house set of batteries. Two different types of batteries. One is a starting battery. The other is a marine battery. So the house batteries are your marine batteries. I recommend something like an 8D Marine, which is a large battery that normally has about, say, 240, 260 ampere hours. So a good, more than 2 kW's worth of power in that individual battery. And so you put, at least 8 of those on your bus. And people go, my God, Lee, 8 batteries. That's a lot of batteries. It is. The problem is that they're lead acid type batteries in most cases, and you can only use 50% of that energy. And so the more batteries you put in, the longer life that you can get out of that stack of batteries. So it'll last longer through the night, and it'll last longer in years. So you put a lot of batteries in it. You put those in underneath of the floor, mounted up underneath the bottom of the bus, and you do that in front of the axles, the rear axle. And so always balance your bus. Yeah, well, always balance your bus. So don't do like a lot of stupid manufacturers do with RVs and motor coaches and so on and so forth. You go down the highway and you look at them and they're kind of leaning to the left or kind of leaning to the right. And that's because they put all the water tanks and the septic tanks and the LP bottles and everything else and the generator all on one side. And the other side has nothing on it. So, be thinking about that when you're putting it in. Don't have one giant water tank on one side. Have 2, one on each side, and run a small line back and forth between the 2. And then you can mount solar panels on the top of the bus. They can go into charge controllers that can charge the batteries that are in the bus. Then Redneck Heating 101. You go and get yourself small water bus heaters. They're little squares. They're probably about 8 inches by 8 inches by 10 inches. And they hook to the hot water lines that normally hook to a bus, from the engine to the normal heater core. And you place these in the rear of the bus in the different room areas, I would recommend at least 3. You separate them out and plumb them separately from the bus's heating system. So what you have is a loop that goes all the way around between all of the heaters and comes all the way back. And then in that line, you put a water pump, a small, just transfer pump. And then after the discharge of the transfer pump, you put in what's called a ready heater for hot water. You turn it all the way down on low. You can hook that to your inverter. You want to get a 110 volt version. You hook that to your inverter, and then you have little bus heaters that run off of 12 volts. When you're cold at night, your thermostat can click a relay. When it clicks that relay, it'll turn on that ready heater. It'll turn on that little circulating pump, and it'll turn on the fans in your bus heaters, and it'll circulate that hot water through all of those bus heaters and heat up the inside of your bus. And when the inside of the bus reaches the temperature that you want, the relay cuts off, the ready heater cuts off, the pump cuts off, and the fans and the individual bus heaters cut off. And that's the easy and cheap way to heat your bus. You're talking about putting a heating system in your bus for under $300 doing it that way.
So this is the zombie apocalypse bug out bus that you, if you can't afford buying land and stuff, you're buying an entire mobile house that you just drive to a remote area and park.
Yeah. Or you got friends that have land or what have you.
Yeah.
And I recommend
that's a great idea.
Bus. Yeah, I recommend the biggest bus you can get. Because, buses are cheap. You can buy a good used bus for $3,000. And so, you're going to spend, a couple grand probably on the rear end, but I highly recommend, that's one of my, highest recommendations, is that you definitely put a higher rear end into it, because if you can keep the engine operating when you're going down the highway at 70 miles an hour, or if you can keep the engine RPM below 2,000 RPM, that's where you're going to get your best fuel mileage. So that's why I always recommend to keep those lower RPMs on the engine, because that allows you better fuel mileage. It's not as much wear and tear on your bus, and you can get on down the highway, and it helps you if you need to evade someone, because now you got a bus that does more than 55.
Leah, do you have anything to add?
Well, since we're talking about bugging out, I believe that if you are planning on bugging out because you live in a place where that's probably what you have to do, chances are you live in the suburbs or the city, in which case, and a really important consideration is to prepare to shelter in place for a little while. Because if there's an event, then everybody's going to be leaving at the same time. And if you live in such a place, chances are, if there's a regular rush hour, you're definitely not getting out. This is something I've thought a lot about, because we used to live in Philadelphia before we moved here. And we had a lot of press, but we also knew that was something we'd have to plan on sheltering in place if something happened in the short term. So I'm wondering if you have any tips about sheltering in place temporarily.
Yes, I recommend for you to shelter in place when it hits the fan. Getting on the road is not the thing to do. You want to stay in place, for several days if you can, at least 3, to let everybody, level out or settle out. And then my recommendation is that you have a camera that you can purchase. It's like $60 or something like that. It's a black and white camera. It's made for small drones, and you mount that above the center of the windshield. Looking forward, it has a 120-degree field of view, and I think its low light sensitivity is 0.00001 lux, which is basically about the same capability as an owl. So it's black and white. It's made by, I think it's Eagle is who makes the camera. I'll get the information for you on what the manufacturer is. But what you do is you take that video camera and you mount it in the front. You can get yourself a couple little red infrared LEDs and mount them down on your front bumper. It doesn't take many when you've got a camera with that much infrared sensitivity or low light capability. You mount that on the front. Then on your visor above your windshield, you go and you buy these little cheap 7-inch flat panel LCD widescreen displays, the letterbox 16:9 or what have you displays, and that you mount that to your visor and you run the video feed from the camera on the front into that video display. And that's called a DVE. That's a driver vision enhancement. I built those for years. And so you take this video camera and you have the visor that folds down and you run the video feed into that, and you will actually be able to drive down the road at night.
No headlights.
No headlights on. Right. No headlights on.
I want one now.
Using that visor. If you go to
I'm
my
constantly turning the lights off. Ask Leah.
Yeah. If you go to my YouTube page, I have a video of a DVE. I'm using a thermal imager in that particular application as opposed to a low light infrared camera. It's basically about the same thing. You're still able to see in the dark. Just one sees heat and the other sees light. But you can go, if you get good at it, and you've driven a while, down interstate, you can easily do 75, 85 miles an hour. And on a good, if it's a smooth road and it's a dirt road, you can easily get up to 45 miles an hour down a dirt road and drive it, no problem at all. It's just like driving in a video game. And the biggest trick is you want the camera, wherever you mount the camera, number one, you want it to be in the middle of the vehicle and squarely looking forward. You want a camera that has. Like you're
in NASCAR, then you put it on one side.
Yeah. Well, I'm talking about for this application. So you want the camera to have a little bit of a downward angle to it, and then you want part of the vehicle to be in the field of view to give you a reference. Yeah. So like the top edge of the hood or something of that nature along the bottom of the frame always helps out. You never want below, for a DVE, driver vision enhancement system, the field of view of the driver can never be below 90 degrees. And the reason it can never be below 90 degrees is because he can't see to make a turn. He can see in front of him, but he'll turn the bus into or vehicle into something because it's not a wide enough field of view. So in this particular camera system, in the 3:4 aspect ratio, you can get that camera in 120 degrees. And then so when you take that video in and you run it in the 16:9 format on the video display, it kind of stretches it out, makes it a little bit wider, and it actually makes it really enjoyable to drive. It's like the world's in front of you, and you're driving with a movie theater right there. So that's what I recommend on that. And then you get two more of those, and you can put a video display on your left and a video display on the right. So your video display going forward is the one in the middle, and your left and right, and you put one of those cameras on the left-hand side up at the front looking back to your left, so you have situational awareness of everything on your left, and another one on the right looking back, so you have situational awareness of everything on your right. And then you've got three screens, and a school bus visor is wide enough for three of those video screens to go across it side by side, because I've already done it. So
the killer bus.
Oh, it is. And there's a lot of things you can do to, improve it. You want to insulate it underneath. You want to put something over the windows, because that's where you're going to lose most of your heat out of the bus, because the windows on buses suck. I recommend putting at least a 1/2-inch foam down under the floor. That helps for sound deadening as well as insulation. And then, you just have your water on board. I would recommend 200 gallons of water on it at a minimum. And then probably about 100-gallon septic system and 100-gallon gray water is what I would put on that. I would use a 30 amp input as far as the AC power that comes in. Put all of your water and your electric and your septic connections on the driver's side in the rear. And I would keep try to put this, when you put the heavy things in, put them in between the rear axle and the front axle. Don't put anything heavy behind the rear axle, because when you hit bounces going down the road, it has a tendency to make the front end bounce a lot. And it's like you're riding on a pogo stick. So,
well, I like to do wheelies, so.
Yeah, there you go. And then have somebody build a good hitch system underneath the back of it, so that you can pull a trailer behind it, and then you can take whatever you want with it. And you're pretty much good to go. Those are the basics of, what I would have in it. And I would have a tri-band radio system in it. And I did some research for everybody. The portable walkie-talkie that I recommend to HT is a Yaesu, I think it's an FT60. Is the walkie-talkie when we were talking on our last show about dual band radios. I did a lot of research, and that would be the one that I would purchase for the common everyday guy. They're
that
about
has a
100.
main central hub radio that comes with the package and remote radios?
That's just the individual walkie-talkies themselves.
Okay.
And so if you want to do a repeater, you have to get a license from the FCC, or you can go with somebody in your local area that's GMRS, General Mobile Radio Service, and they may charge you a fee to use their repeater, but it's cheap. But, I was just talking about, forgetting the repeater system just for, bugging out and being able to talk to your buddies when you're on the move. The Yaesu FT60 is the portable. And then I think it's an ICOM base station. I have one, but I haven't pulled it. It's in a box, prepared for this. I haven't pulled it out. I can't remember what the model number of it is, but I'll look it up and get it for you guys. That's the base station that I recommend for everybody, because it's the antenna you want is what they call a disc cone antenna. And a disc cone antenna is capable of basically operating on any frequency. It doesn't have a lot of gain, so it doesn't make it stronger, but it doesn't allow you to put one antenna outside rather than 3 or 4, and you can hook, whatever radio to it you want, and any radio will work off of that antenna. It's a little bigger, but it's a great antenna to have because it works for everything. So if you want to listen to HF of what's going on in another country, and then use the same antenna and the same radio to talk to your buddies outside in the yard, a disc cone antenna will allow you to do that, whereas no other antenna will.
Excellent information. Before we transition to bullets and Band-Aids, let's stick on the topic of beans and food security. Now, we just talked about your bug-out bus, the badass bug-out bus. Mm-hmm. Let's talk about someone that has a compound that they're securing right now. We're putting in alternative energy and alternative types of infrastructure in here, and I'm failed to research this, which is good because you're here and you can answer my questions. I want to be putting out in this off-grid bathroom system we have by the river a thermal water heater with some induction panels and a water heater type storage. Mm-hmm. With glycol maybe, and use it also to heat the bathroom itself as well as the water. Have you used those units, and do you know?
Yes.
Because the newer ones are getting cheaper and cheaper. I saw on the internet. So can you recommend some and tell us how they work and how you can maybe use the extra heat between the panels and the hot water heater holder to actually heat a room?
Well, I actually used to heat my house with it.
Yeah. Okay.
I had a house on a mountain overlooking White Sands, New Mexico. And so I didn't want to, pay to heat the place all the time. And basically what I was trying to do is it gets cold at night. And I was trying to keep the house warm at night, but without, paying for it. So the local school had some solar panel heat collectors for running water through them on the top that they had used for heating, and they were taking them off and upgrading them. So when I drove by, I saw them taking them down. I was like, hey, what are you guys going to do with those? Oh, they're going to the dump. I was like, well, I'll carry them away for you if you don't mind. Oh, yeah, sure. So they gave them all to me, gave me hose and everything.
Meg.
So what I did was we took the panels. We put them on the roof of the house. We put a solar panel up on the roof of the house. We faced them to the south. When the sun would come up in the daytime, it would cut on the electric pump that was in the swimming pool. It was in the middle of the house, and it would pull the hot water out of the swimming pool, run it up through the solar collectors on the roof, and then bring the hot water back down into the house. It would drain back through gravity feed back into the house, and it would heat the pool in the center of the house, and that would heat the entire house. So I had a heated swimming pool, and I think the swimming pool, I think it held 15,000 gallons, something like that. But anyway, it wasn't that big. But it was big enough to swim around in, for inside your house. But it was
that's a lot of thermal mass. I mean, you can keep the temperature constant for 24 hours with that.
Right, it did. And so what we did was, if the temperature was above a certain temperature inside the house, it wouldn't make the connection for the electric motor. And we used just a regular thermal knob that you can get at a auto parts store to cut on an electric fan in your car, so it's adjustable thermostat. And so it just made an electrical connection. So if it was too warm in the house, if it was above 85 degrees in the house, we wouldn't turn on the pump to circulate the water. And so we could set it anywhere you wanted. And it was always warm at night. It was great. And I did it in a Saturday afternoon, and I think I spent, buying the solar panel and the pump and everything, I think I probably had $200 in it. So
it amazes me why there aren't millions of people using these systems for the last 5 decades. It's amazing how corrupt this capitalistic system is, where you can actually lobby against things that are good for humanity in order for people to become less self-sufficient and pay more money to the man. It's disgusting.
Yeah.
And the more you just learn how simple it is, like getting some used accumulators to heat your whole pool and house, the crazier the reality of what we're living in is.
Yeah. The technology is there, and I'm a big believer. Everybody says the KISS principle: keep it simple, stupid. Well, I changed it a little bit. I got to be a little more politically correct, so I say keep it super simple. And so I do the easiest and the most economical way with the least number of parts, because that creates the least number of points of failure. Mm-hmm. And, if you can just get it down to the simplest denominators, then you've got a that within itself makes a robust system, because you have so few of parts.
Yeah, so, I use this analogy with Anita Bailey, that as a rock climber, every single thing you add is another link of failure. So
yes.
Each single link you add is killing you times 10. And so you want to get it real simple. I really like that. Leah, do you have anything to add?
Not at the moment.
Awesome. Let's go to bullets and Band-Aids.
Okay. So we'll go to the bullets first. I recommend that everyone has a minimum of 3 weapons. And so that would be a semi-automatic pistol, no smaller than a 9mm. I say go with a 10, or like the guys that used to carry the old 40 cals. We carry a 40 cal. Why shoot twice?
Well, our 45 is super compact. Super compact.
Right.
It's as small as the 9.
They have a Springfield XDS that's just, incredibly tiny, which also makes recoil a little tougher. But
right. So, you've got, everybody has a pistol. They have at least 3 extra magazines that are, full. I recommend a hollow point semi-jacket for the rounds to use in it, because if you're shooting something with it, the object is to, the object of shooting at it is to make it stop, and a hollow point semi-jacket has a really good ability to do that. So, in the second weapon that I recommend everyone to have is a shotgun, either a pump or something that is automatic that has a tube on it that you can put 3 rounds into it, whatever the law is, or if things go bad, you might want to put more in it. With that, I recommend there's a round that has 3 buckshot pellets and a slug combined in it. That's what I recommend, because that way you know you've got accuracy, and if you're off by a little bit, there's a chance you might wing them with one of the buckshot pellets. So that's what I put into that. And then the third weapon of choice is a semi-automatic rifle that has magazines that have a minimum of 30 rounds. And with that, again, I recommend a hollow point for that, for game or what have you. And the trick on getting a lot of people like AR-15s. If you're going to get an AR-15, get it cartridged in the 5.56 as opposed to the 2.23. And the advantage of getting it in the 5.56 is that a 5.56 will still chamber a 2.23, whereas that if you try to put a 5.56 into a 2.23, you'll damage the weapon every time you fire it because it's not shouldering properly. So that's how you can, and it's dangerous. Whereas that if you purchase it in a 5.56, you can run the 2.23 and the 5.56 ammunition in it, and there's not a problem with the weapon. So that if you're dead set on you got to have an AR-15, get it in 5.56.
That gives you 2 weapons right there. That's a really good point. Leah, do you have I know you have something to say.
Yeah, no, I mean, I certainly agree with the traditional trifecta of pistol, shotgun, rifle. I also agree with your point about hollow points. And I like the 3 buckshot plus slug. I think that's a great idea. Certainly we keep lots of buckshot and slugs around for different purposes, but combining them into one round is excellent in a tough situation. I actually feel strongly about pump shotguns. The reason being is that the sound of a pump shotgun, just that noise is sometimes enough to make somebody run away. When somebody hears that, that can be real handy. And I also think that if you're inside, if you're looking to defend yourself inside a building, that a pistol grip can be a good way to go, simply because it gives you a lot more ability to maneuver in small spaces. And I also appreciate the point about 5.56 for AR-15s. I definitely agree with that. It's a lot more flexibility. And the other thing I'd throw in there for AR-15s is to go with a gas piston model as opposed to a direct impingement, just simply because it keeps it a bit cleaner. I don't know if you agree with that or not, Lee.
I do, and there's actually a guy down here. I can't give you the model number of it, but there's a new system actually that uses a rod in it. Yes, and the guy has added a rod. I'll have to get you a friend of mine who was a marksman for the Army for years and years and years put one into his, and he absolutely raves about it, but I can't remember right now what the manufacturer's name is, but I'll get that to you. But cool. He absolutely loves that. The other thing I recommend is a laser with a light combination.
Amen.
That goes on it. Mine are a laser light. I can fire both simultaneously or one or the other, depending upon how I have the switch on the bottom set. Always put the laser under the barrel. The reason for that is if you're in an urban combat environment, which is known as MOUT, military operations on urban terrain, and you're trying to fire over walls, or you're inside of a building and you're trying to fire down out of the window, if the laser is beside the barrel or above the barrel, the laser may be making contact with the target, but the trajectory of the bullet will not. It may be hitting the window seal or something of that nature. So what you want to do is always put the laser under the barrel, so as that if the laser beam is clearing the window seal, then the bullet will also, because it's above it. So always put it underneath and put it as far out as you can. because when you turn that light on, the farther back on the weapon it is, the more of you that it is illuminating, because you'll get indirect casting or dispersion off of the weapon that's lighting you up. And then get a small, if you can, get yourself like a toilet paper tube, and you can put electrical tape around it and tape it around on the outside of it, and that creates a shield on the side, so the only people that see the light are the people directly in front of the weapon, the people on this off to your side. So it decreases your chances of being seen by adversaries on either side of you or behind you, because the light's coming out through a tube that's about 3 inches long is my preferred length.
Yeah, and if you're a team and they're your weapons at your facility, I recommend if you have ARs or pistol grip shotguns to have adjustable shoulder stocks, so that if Leah's going to be taking the shotgun and I'm going to be taking the AR, that we can quickly adjust it to our shooting styles and be comfortable, instead of having a weapon that's crappy for your size, quickly adjustable with the lighting and everything we just discussed. That way it's very versatile, and depending on what situation you have, you can immediately be equipped quickly.
Yeah, and now I set everything up so as that the shoulder stock is collapsed all the way, all the time.
Okay.
And the reason that I do that is it makes the weapon shorter, and if you're holding it up and walking with it and keeping it up, to your shoulder for an extended period of time, there's less of that out in front of you, so it has less leverage. You can get the center of gravity back closer to you, and it allows you to hold it up there for a longer period of time when you're either out on a patrol or scanning an area with a night vision scope or a regular scope, what have you. So I push all my scopes forward and bring the weapon back, so it's closer into you, and it also allows you to move through an urban environment or get in and out of vehicles or go through the brush or whatever easier, because the weapon's shorter.
Excellent tip that a normal civilian wouldn't know.
Yeah, and since you mentioned night vision scopes, I wonder if you have any that you recommend. I have one that I like very much that I can't remember the brand or the model number of right now, but I thought maybe you might have some
Well,
ideas.
yes, I do, because I have the original prototype of the PVS-14 here on my kitchen counter. It's the house in Texas, and it just got delivered back here today. But anyway,
that's the 24-pound version.
No. This is the PVS-14. It's everybody uses it. It's the single monocular that you always see on the Special Forces guys.
Okay.
And so, back in the 80s. I was trying to put a night vision scope onto a rifle and use an infrared illuminator on the weapon or designator, so as that I could bring I didn't like the big scope that the military had. They had this huge monstrosity of a thing that was really heavy, and it was great for, long distance snipers and stuff like that. But the guy in urban combat, it sucked for him. So I wanted to make one for the mount guy. So what I did was I took an Anvis 6 tube, which is the aviator's night vision goggles. It's a pair of tubes. I took one of those and I made a bracket for the bottom of it to go onto what they call a Picatinny rail, or what was originally called the RIS, rail interface system. And I made that mount and put it on the bottom of it. And then because it didn't have a battery pack, I went to Radio Shack and got a AA battery pack and glued it to the top of it and put 2 AA batteries in it. And I took it to ITT and showed the guys at ITT, and they about flipped out, because I now had a compact scope that would go on top of an M16, and I could thread a 3x magnifier on the front of it. So I did have a little bit of magnification. And because the lens of the 3x scope was larger, it didn't degrade the light gain of the night vision goggle. That's a problem that people have. You put a zoom lens in front of a night vision, and because the aperture of the lens is not large enough, not enough light comes in. So if you make it 3 times bigger, you've got 1/3 the light. So you've got to increase the size of the aspect or the aperture lens on the front of the camera, or the night vision device. So that was the original PVS-14. And so that went on for years and is still in production now until the new Special Forces, multi goggle. And then what we're doing for the Special Forces, which is actually a SWIR, which stands for Shortwave Infrared. It's a thermal imager night vision scope combined that feeds on a 1080 heads-up display screen in front of the soldier, and has what's called a HOS, a helmet orientation sensor, and does augmented reality, because if you're over hiding behind a tree on the other side of the field, when I rotate my head around, a little bubble will come up on the screen in front of me and say, hey, Dave and Leah are over there behind those two trees, and show me exactly where you're at, and you'll be blue. Whereas and if there's an enemy on the screen, they'll show up as red. Just any time anybody logs it in. It's a really awesome system. I'll send you guys some pictures of it. Maybe you can put it in.
Is there a civilian version?
Yeah, you can actually make, and this is the crazy part about it. So the camera I was talking about before, for $60, $70 that you can get the Eagle, you can get, I think it's an Eagle View is what the camera's called. You can get that camera, and then they make these, what they call FPV goggles for people that fly drones. And you can glue this camera on top of that and feed the video out of that into the night vision, or into the FPV goggles. The camera will cost you $70. The FPV goggles will cost you $120, $30 for the battery pack and charger. And you've got basically night vision goggles, because now you've got a visor. So that's the cheapest, easiest way to do it. And something that everybody can afford, under $200, because night vision goggles, you have second gen plus, third gen plus, third gen Supra, and then you got the Omnibus 4 tube. Well, when you go, and what makes that good is in excess of 30,000 light gain, which means it makes it 30,000 times brighter, and then it has a resolution of greater than what's called 150 line pairs. And so if you're buying a night vision goggle that is of that quality, you're going to spend $2,500.
Mm-hmm.
So, if you get a PVS 14 or a PVS 7 Delta with an illuminator built on, and the head harness and the bag and all that other stuff, you're talking $3,800, and if it's an Omnibus 4 tube, you're talking probably $4,200 for that kit. And so
and
now
Lee's hillbilly version is like $50.
$250.
Okay.
$250. So you can buy a whole lot more of them for $250 than you can when they're anywhere from $2,300 to $5,000, depending upon what you're getting on the other end. And it's just a very simple, easy way to have a low light capability to walk around using, moonlight. And that's the other thing people don't realize. Your remote control for your TV set is a flashlight for your night vision goggles. It flickers because of the pulse that it's sending out to the TV, but it's still a light source. So you can take that LED right out of the end of that TV remote control and hook it to probably a 1.5 volt battery, and ta-da, you've got your own infrared light source. And then another thing that you can do is you can go to Lowe's or Dollar General or wherever, and they have these little motion lights that are solar powered, and they're, I guess, about the size of 4 packs of cigarettes, 2 sets side by side with 2 on top of them, and they've got a solar panel on the top and a little white screen on the front, and then there's a little white ball, half of a ball in the middle. That's the infrared sensor. And so what you can do is you can take the LEDs out of that and replace them with infrared LEDs. And then you place those around your perimeter, and you can have a camera system that detects motion. You can use these $60 cameras again, have that come into your DVR, have the DVR trigger anytime there's motion, and then if somebody walks by your property or comes up your driveway or does anything, the camera sees the infrared light, the people don't. When they walk up, it turns the light on, it illuminates it for the camera to see great, it sets off an alarm because it's detecting that area lit up. It's alerting you to it. It's illuminating for you to see and the camera to see, but it never lets them know. And so that is a cheap and easy way to augment your surveillance system, just simply by changing out some LEDs. And you can use it with white light too. And that's another thing I like to do. If I've got areas that look like it would be a great place to sneak in the property, great. I leave it that way, and then I illuminate that with infrared, and that's my most guarded area because that's where all the idiots will go. They're going, oh, there's no lights down there. Yeah. I made that hole for you, buddy. Come on in. So that's how you want to look at that. You want to walk around your property from the outside going, if I was going to try to sneak into their house, how would I do it? And get your friends to do the same thing, because they're all going to come up with about the same plan. And so the best plan is to make 2 routes coming into your house that look like easy ways to get in, and don't illuminate those. And then those are what we call the gauntlet. And then that's where they, will actually get picked up. We've got that set up for the dogs or what have you, however you're going to deal with that. And then you want to go to beans next? Or you still want to go with weapons?
We went beans, bullets, and Band-Aids.
Yeah, so with the beans, I recommend freeze-dried or just dried beans in bags, and then get the plastic tubs. You can get them from feed stores and so on and so forth that have the lid that seals onto the top of them. I think they probably hold, 10 or 15 gallons at most each. And you can fill that up with your beans, your rice, your dried goods, and then you can get a small bottle of nitrogen. And what you do is when you put all the beans and your rice and everything down into the to the tub, you leave an inch or 2 in there, and you take yourself a little candle. You set the candle in there and you light it so the candle's burning, and then you have a plastic tube going down inside, and the nitrogen is going in and filling up the tube, or excuse me, filling up the drum. And as it's filling it up, when it gets to the top.
I'm sorry, I got to cut you off. We're at the break. Right. We're going to be back with Lee Wheelbarger and Leah Shaper. This is Diamond from the Oppenheimer Ranch Project, bringing you another episode of The Inconvenient Truth. We'll be covering more preparedness details when we get back, and we're going to be talking about the fallacies of burying your own shipping container. Not! Stay tuned.
Radio at freedomslips.com, and we'll be right back after this message.
Enter into a world unseen on Raven Star's Witching Hour. You will encounter eclectic topics from the realm of spirit brought into our matrix of truth. With your host, the Solaris Blue Raven. Solaris will bring you an array of unique guests covering topics from ghostly spirits to amazing anomalies, covert technology, UFOs, and shadowy global events.
And that's right here at Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, Saturdays, midnight till 2 a.m. Eastern Time. Revolution Radio, where information never sleeps.
Let the magic rise.
Join me weekdays for my new show, Tell Chris Joe. It's going to be a problem show brought to you live from Kensington. Thursdays, I'm dealing with hot topics, heated debate, what's new around the world, and ring-ins to discuss listeners' problems and offering considered and heartfelt solutions. So join me, Chris Hart, for Tell Chris Joe. Stop what you're doing, grab a cup of tea. I'm coming live from Kensington. Relax. Let me entertain you with a coffee bar online. Listeners' very personal problems. So that's Thursdays, 2 p.m. in the afternoon, Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. See you there. It's going to be lots of fun.
This is Barbara DeLong, host of Nightlight Radio, inviting you to join me on a cosmic journey, exploring a metaphysical montage of spiritual material, covering everything from the mundane to the magical, UFOs to unicorns, and everything in between, including spiritual readings for those who seek enlightenment. Let Nightlight provide you with equal measure of light, love and laughter, insight, wisdom, and inspiration. Monday nights, 10 to 12 p.m. Eastern, right here on Studio B, Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com.
The opinions expressed on this radio station, its programs, and its website by the hosts, guests, and call-in listeners or chatters are solely the opinions of the original source who expressed them. They do not necessarily represent the opinions of Revolution Radio and freedomslips.com, its staff, or affiliates. You're listening to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host.
I love that fake laughter. This is Diamond, and I'm back with the second half, guys. Thanks for staying with us. This is a stimulating conversation we're having with Lee Wheelbarger. We just got to the preparedness part where we talk about no more peas, but we're on beans. And we were just talking about how to store your dried goods. Lee was covering a technique that I'm not familiar with. If you go on many of these sites, they're just telling you go to buy the Chinese oxygen depletion packets and chuck a few of those in. But Lee is doing a little bit more technical version of actual oxygen depletion using science. So Lee, can you hit him with some more science?
Yeah, so what I do is I fill the container up with the dried goods, have a small plastic tube like an aquarium tube that goes into the bottom of the drum before we put the dried goods in. Then we fill the drum up till it's almost full, say a few inches from the top, and then you can take a small tea candle like you see at a restaurant table or what have you, and you set that in the top of the drum. And when you crack your valve, just barely cracking the valve on the nitrogen gas is heavier than air. So it will start filling up the bottom of the chamber with the nitrogen. And when it comes up to the point where it gets to the candle, it will displace the oxygen. The candle will go out. It'll push the smoke out of the top. And then you know that the container is full of nitrogen. Leave the valve on, reach in, take the tea candle out, put the lid on, except for the edge, and then cut the valve off and pull the hose out, and then put the lid the rest of the way down on easily and seal it up. That goods, whatever it is, rice, beans, what have you, in that container are then, if they're sealed and you don't turn it over, that nitrogen will stay in there for decades, and you can come back and eat that food. So that is permanently preserved, and a can of nitrogen gas is not that expensive. So if you're going to store dried goods, that is how I recommend doing it. When it comes to meats, make jerky. Jerky is a great thing. You can vacuum pack it, seal it, put salt on it, so on and so forth. It will keep for a long time, and you can actually put that in these containers as well. So
there's some
highly
great
recommend.
hydrators on the market for that as well.
Actually, got 4 great big ones here. Love them.
I wanted to point out, too, with bucket storage that condensation is a concern, because obviously if you get moisture in there, it's going to ruin whatever's in the bucket. So I would suggest using Mylar bags to line the buckets with, or even plastic bags can work. And that's especially true if you're going to use metal containers of any kind. Do you have any thoughts about eliminating moisture?
Yeah, well, that's what I'm saying. The nitrogen will take that out. The nitrogen will take the moisture out of it, because there's no air in there to have the moisture in. So if you have dried beans and, dried rice or what have you, when you put it in and it's dry, when you put the nitrogen in it, you don't have to worry about that anymore because you're sealing it. You're going to try to make it into an airtight container. So I've never had that. And I store things in a, environmentally controlled, room. So I don't have a problem with heating and cooling back and forth to get that condensation issue. So I would recommend a root cellar for putting them in, something of that nature, if you don't have the capability.
Yeah, Don the carpenter here has a couple questions for you as far as that. He's got thousands of dollars worth of preps here. He's about to seal up, and he wants to have them in the perfect environment for long-term storage, which is obviously climate controlled. Now, what we're doing here in this area is we're going to be putting in several different, let's say, bunkers, below ground bunker type root cellars, where we split apart different parcels in case one gets destroyed, damaged, or found, where we have, equal amounts in each place. Now, what is the optimum temperature and humidity, and how do you do it where you store your long-term goods?
Well, we have coolers here. So we have refrigeration that you can put everything in. So the cooler the temperature, the better. And you want a dry environment. So if you can have and I don't use metal for storing food. Everything that we are storing is going into a plastic container. We do not use galvanized steel for anything except for Faraday cages and putting electronics in. So that way, when you go in, the metal ones have electronics and the plastic ones have food. And so, and I like the plastic ones better. They never rust. That you can move them around. They don't bang. They don't dent.
They seal better.
Yeah, they seal way better.
But the key for the plastic ones, you can't have any rodents. So the potential for rodents needs to be almost zero to store plastics.
I have not. I've heard that, but I have never had a rodent be able to chew through one of these containers. I've never even seen chew marks on one from a rodent.
Okay,
I'm not saying that it can't be done.
That's hearsay. I don't have any experience.
I've never seen it.
I think even if you just doubled up the buckets and took a look at them periodically, that would probably take care of that problem. Because I imagine it would take a rodent a while to chew through two plastic buckets.
Well, I don't use the 5-gallon. I use a 30-gallon container.
Right.
The wall of my container is 1/4 of an inch thick. So it's going to take the rodent a little while to get through there.
Where do you source those containers?
You can get them from feed stores. It's just it's a food grade, like 15, 20-gallon shipping container. They're plastic. I think we pay $12 a piece for them. And, you just go and you can put, 100 pounds of grain in it. Put a little
okay, so now I got these buckets in my bunker, and I got my can of nitrogen, and I'm filling up the nitrogen in my buckets. At what point do we all pass out and die?
You don't.
And how do we monitor that?
Well, that's how you. Well, first off, you don't do it in the bunker. You want to do that in in your house or what have you, and you're only opening the valve. You're just cracking the valve. And the way you know that it's full is you can hold a Bic lighter down in above the food, not to catching the food on fire, but you can hold a Bic lighter down in there, and as the nitrogen gas fills up the inside of the container, when it gets up to the point of where the Bic lighter is, the Bic lighter will go out.
The canary in the coal mine.
Yep, and it goes out, and then the container's full of nitrogen gas, and you just let it go another second or two to make sure it's full, and put the lid on, and then slowly pull the hose out and cut the valve off, and then you twist that down tight on the top because it's a thread-on cap. You thread that on and go around it 5 or 6 times with some 3M Super 88 electrical tape. Super 33 will work, but I only recommend 3M 33 and 88. It holds up much better and much longer, and you seal that off, and that food's good forever. Pretty much, you can come back when you're 80 years old, and it'll still be good.
Yeah, stay away from all tapes and all containers from the dollar store if you're long-term prepping, please.
Yes,
because you'll come back, it'll be melted, and you'll eat the food and you'll die. So do not use those products. And also, I just want to reiterate: the colder, the better. Maintain the temperature. And as far as seed storage, you want it dark, cold, and 0% humidity. So a lot of people get these cheap repurposed freezers or box freezers, and they don't realize that they're only frost-free for a certain period of time until the frost-free aspect goes away, and then everything gets moisture and ruined even though it's cold. So if you're going that refrigeration unit, you've got to be on top of it and checking that humidity daily. Do you agree with what I'm saying, Lee?
Well, I do it different than that. I take mason jars and heat the mason jars up pretty warm, and then put the seeds.
Oh, you were
into
telling me about
jar.
this dry canning. Dry canning, yeah.
Yeah. And you just dry can it, and then when the mason jar is hot, you put the seeds down inside of it and close the lid on it, and it'll when it cools, it'll suck it in tight and keep all the air out of it. Or you can do the same thing and put nitrogen in it and put the lid on it and keep it out that way.
You can dry can dry beans and rice also, which won't sprout, but it will keep for a very long time in mason jars. It's just that you would have thousands of these jars.
Yeah.
So let's talk about burying shipping containers and the fallacy involved in that. I did some research, and a lot of these yayos just go into the woods, dig a hole, throw the shipping container in, and bury it, and it doesn't turn out very good. Do you have any experience with that, Lee?
I have experience through other people in that.
Tell us some stories.
People's failures.
Well, yeah. So if you're going to do that, you have to build a concrete pad under it and cinder block walls full of concrete around it, and then you got to put concrete over top of it, form it in, and put concrete over it, and then don't drive over it. They will crush in. They are not designed for that. They're made to bear weight only on their corners and in the middle where those beams come up. There's side strength of those to try to hold back dirt or to drive across it with dirt on top of it. It doesn't happen. They cave in. So if you want to waste some time and get yourself killed, go ahead and bury a shipping container without putting a wall up around it. It's actually cheaper to put just the concrete up. The advantage of the shipping container is you can make it a Faraday cage, and that's the appeal of a shipping container, because it'll work as a Faraday cage if you screen off one end of it and go all the way to the raw metal on the inside. So that's a shipping container is a cheap Faraday cage. So if you want to bunker underground, build the bunker and then slide the shipping container in it, and then put the Faraday cage in and end into it with the doorway, and you're good to go.
It seems to me, too, that the other reason to have the shipping container inside something else is simply for moisture issues, because a container isn't necessarily fully sealed.
The redneck way to deal with that is you spray it with roof tar.
Ah, yeah.
Yeah, I've seen that on YouTube. And we have a question coming in from Scott, our producer, who's producing a show right now and listening in. He is wondering, this is for the homeowner that wants local communication in a grid-down situation or emergency situation. Can you, Lee, discuss the difference between 11-meter CB and 10-meter ham, and what a homeowner can get their hands on to maybe contact people in the local community during an event?
Well, the only real difference between the two is really the frequency range. The CB radio, you can only talk on legally 5 watts. On the ham radio, I think you can go up to 1,000 watts. I don't even know if the wattage is limited in the 10-meter band. But if I was going to do my local community and wanted to communicate around my community, that would not be the way I would do it. I would do it with a VHF system in somewhere between 138 and 174 megahertz. That way people in the community could carry portables. You could have radios in vehicles, and you would, if you had a base station, you'd still be able to talk to your portables for miles, and you'd be able to talk to another base station if you had a good antenna on your base and the other base station had a good antenna on theirs, and you had 30, 40, 50 watt radios, you should be able to talk at least 30 or 40 miles. So VHF would be my preferred frequency range to use in that particular application.
I think, okay, that sounds great if you're setting up a communication system in your community. But I believe what he was asking, let's say you're panicked and you're at home and you're looking for a signal out there for other people to be there. Can you use a CB or the ham? Which would you be looking for to find people? Not people you already know, to find others.
I would use an HF radio, and I would get a radio. I would just get a broadband. I think it's Grumby, Grumby or Grundy, that makes a really good. They're about $80-$90. You can get them in a hand cranked version, and you want one that has an external antenna capability to it, so that you can connect an external antenna that's outside of the house and be able to hear what's going on around the world, because that's where you're going to hear the HF communications. You're going to hear ship to shore communications. You're going to hear aircraft communications, long haul communications, government to government, Radio America, stuff like that is all going to be broadcast in that HF spectrum. So to see who is hurt where, or who is still around in the world, the HF receiver would be my choice. And, that would go from down in the kilohertz all the way up to probably 30 megahertz would be the frequency range that I would be looking for to do that. And again, you would want either a long wire antenna or a disc cone type, large disc cone type antenna for that.
Yeah, and this is for everyone listening. It's so you can listen in on all these frequencies. You don't need a ham radio operator's license, because these devices are just receivers, and they receive in all spectra. So you could potentially pick up anything if you're looking for it, and that's a really good thing. I didn't know they had hand cranks, but obviously they do, and it's something we need to get a few of here. So as far as the 10-meter ham, you need a license to operate that?
Yes, if anytime you are operating on a ham radio frequency, you either have to have a license, or you have to have a licensed operator with you, or it's an emergency situation, whereas that the person that was with you that has the ham radio is incapacitated, and you can pick up the radio and call for help. You can operate pretty much on any frequency, anytime, as long as the message that you are relaying is pertaining to a life or death situation. So, if a police officer is shot, and he can't talk or what have you, you can pick up that police officer's radio and say, hey, this police officer just got shot here. I'm at the intersection of this. And they won't prosecute you for that, because that is an emergency transmission for a life savings event. So, that's the advantage of amateur radio, or the way that the government works is, if it's life threatening, you can talk on it, because it's,
I think, Lee, the big advantage to any of our listeners in getting a ham radio's operator's license currently is the fact that their broad-based knowledge of space weather will increase astronomically. And the times we're going into, it is important for the general public that are following this to be knowledgeable about space weather and what happens in the whole realm of propagation waves. Now, this is what is used in the ham realm, and it is very important to know the condition of the plasmasphere in order to send out your radio waves. There are certain good conditions and poor conditions, and they're all related to space weather. Now, unfortunately, the solar minimum we're going into is related to poor ham radio conditions. But also, with the waning magnetosphere, any small perturbation from the sun then offers an opportunity for propagation. So it's a plus and a minus. Do you have any thoughts on space weather, the times we're going into, and the fact that anyone that's listening that's preparing for the grand solar minimum should have a ham radio operator's license, simply from the information they will gain on their space weather knowledge?
I agree with that, and they should go to a technician as opposed to a technician light.
That's a level in the licensing, correct? Yeah.
Correct. And the space weather mainly affects the long haul communications that reflect their signal off of the ionosphere, and they count on a level of basically 10 meter or 10.7, whatever it is, flux. And the higher that flux is, the better refractivity you get off of it. They're skipping the signal off of the ionosphere, like skipping a rock off of a lake or a creek. So that applies to the HF frequencies. But in the VHF and the UHF, that's not it doesn't affect that nearly as much because those type of communications don't normally use the atmosphere for their communications. They're more of a line of sight type of communications. So the space weather doesn't play as much of an effect into those spectrums. However, when you get up into satellite communications or GPS communications and things of that nature, flares on the sun and space weather can influence and affect that, and lower the number of satellites that you can receive, as well as play tricks on how your system receives it so that it won't give you as accurate of a GPS location from your receiver. And I see that here. I can tell you what the space weather is I'm working in a field, because my tractor will move a little bit with the GPS driving it. It'll change my tracks and stuff periodically when I've got significant space weather. KP3 and KP4 up in there, I'll notice a little bit of inaccuracy within the machine, but it's only within a couple inches. So you can see it. It does affect the GPS communications, the MRSAT, the Iridium satellite phones. Those type things can be affected by the space weather as well. But VHF and UHF, and not so much. That's why I recommend those. Those are great for your group. The way I look at it, when it does hit the fan, 99% of your communications will be on VHF and UHF. You'll listen to HF communications, but you won't be talking. And if you do, it's to somebody who a long ways away. It wouldn't be a daily thing. It could be a net that you could check in from your town to the other town or whatever, or past news or messages or whatever. But I feel that the majority of the communications will be between you and your tight-knit group or your neighbors or community or, your, preppers group, what have you. For day-to-day operations. And if you're outside and you're not in a city, I highly recommend VHF, and if you're in a city, use UHF.
I want to throw something else in there for local communication as well. Anita Bailey actually suggested getting old military field phones that you, like from the World War II era, that apparently you can pick up a lot of these on eBay just for communicating with your group, which would be relatively secure. I wonder if you have any thoughts about that, Lee.
That's an expensive endeavor. The phones are cheap, but the wire to run from one location to another isn't.
Oh, wire.
Yeah. So, I think you can go 1,000 feet for like $140, but that's point to point. You see what I'm saying? I mean, it's like the old landline phone in your house, and you sit there and crank it, and it rings on the other end, and hey, and you talk off a couple capacitors, and when it gets low, you crank it again, and that's great.
I scream like $400 worth of wire, so I'm good.
Yeah. So yeah, there you go. So yeah,
good to know.
Yeah. So yeah, you can
stay away from the military phones, and it sounds like VHF is the way to go.
Yeah. Yep. A couple antennas and, a couple extra chargers, 3 batteries, have battery packs that you can put the AA batteries in that are rechargeable. So you can put those into it, cycle your batteries, number your batteries. So, 1, 2, and 3, and you always use them the same, going around so they all get equal usage. Run your batteries down. Don't just charge them and use them for a little bit and then put them back on the charger and then use them a little bit and put them back on the charger. That's not good on the battery. The battery does want to be cycled. So I recommend, you take the battery out and you use it for a while. On your radios, use your battery save function. So is that it doesn't monitor all the time. Scanning uses a lot of electricity. So if you've got a group of people, when you need to scan multiple frequencies, only have a single person do that scanning. Operate your radios on the lowest power setting that you can still maintain clear communications. That helps preserve the transmitter, helps preserve the battery, and helps preserve your location if you don't want other people to hear what you're saying. What else? Headsets. I highly recommend headsets, earpieces, over the ear, what have you. That way, if somebody's talking to you on the radio, other people around you aren't going to hear it and give away your position if you happen to be looking at something or hunting or whatever it is that you're doing at the time. So I highly recommend earpieces and lapel mics or headsets. Headsets are my preferred method.
I really liked your redneck night vision goggle thing, because one of the things I've been thinking about is using trail cams for local security. However, trail cams get expensive, and obviously you need more than one. And I'm wondering if you have any thoughts about that.
Trail cams are good and bad, and we have numerous cameras here. And so for positions of egress where people are coming in and out through gates or near roads and so on and so forth, all of our trail cams are trophy cams, and they're connected through the internet back to our phones. So anytime anybody comes near one of those cameras, it takes a photograph or multiple photographs of them and sends it to us, and we normally have it within about 30 seconds. So they work good. The problem is that when the grid goes down, that relay back to you is not going to work. So for that problem, we have cameras that operate off of 12 volts. They're HD cameras, have a very low light capability, and you can power them off of solar from the router and the microwave transmitter, and we're only using a 1/4 of a watt transmitter. From the microwave and the hub, you can go 250 feet in each direction. So you can run Ethernet cables out and put cameras up in different places. Additionally, you can put, if the camera has a 120-degree field of view on it, you can put 3 of them up on a pole, and that gives you a complete 360-degree field of view around that camera. And then you can run that down into the router and the microwave and transmit it back to here. So that's our own internal secure network as a point-to-point microwave, and allows us to see what our cameras are doing. And then each of those cameras records in real time. So not only do we record on the server here, we can record on the camera itself records. So in the event that the connection is lost or the server goes down or what have you, you can always log straight into the IP address of the camera and play the video back from the camera. And I think it records for like 6 months or something.
Excellent.
See how far you can go back. And the cameras, I'll have to get the brand name. Just got another box full of them out here it's on the patio now. I have to go out and get the brand name off of it to tell you what they are. Ubiquity.
All right. We'll be ready for you at the end of the summer to set that up. Let's move on to Band-Aids, because that's a lot to talk about. I think we really covered communications pretty thoroughly. Is there anything that we missed, do you think, Lee?
No, I think we pretty much got it. Get solar panels and lots of batteries for your radios and extra antennas and extra radios. That's all I can tell you. And, get used to them, play with them a little bit, get some experience with it. This isn't something that you want to buy and just stick in a corner and then just when it hits the fan, break it out. You want to have them programmed with the frequencies you're going to need and do the research. And I'll try to, on one of my, on my YouTube page, I'll create another link that's for, when it hits the fan communication frequencies, and I'll put links of videos on there that have the most common frequencies to put in the radio, so that you'll be able to catch, other people talking on FRS, GMRS, or MERS, or whatever frequency range or channels that they may be in.
Yeah, so extra panels, extra batteries, extra batteries, extra batteries.
Extra practice.
Yep.
And practice.
Yes.
That's why you need the ham radio's operator's license. It's going to force you to study. They're going to test you, and you're going to have to be familiar with the products, which is the most important thing, being familiar with it, because when the situation occurs that you're going to need to use it, you're going to need to know how to use it. Proper prior planning prevents piss-poor performance, where we're headed, which is where Band-Aids come in. Now, I suggest all of you can easily open up your newspaper every week, and you'll be able to find a first aid course, a CPR course. Start there. If you have no first aid skill, go there and get your first aid and CPR certificate from the YMCA. It only costs a few dollars. If you're a little bit more advanced, you can look into swift water rescue and other things that are being offered in your local communities. which are also available and will give you more preparedness skills for flooding situations and just general really high-stress scenarios where people are going to be in shock. You really want to learn situations on how to be calm and how to react in situations where people are in shock, because that's what's going to be happening in the future. Another good thing to be versed in is suturing, and you could buy suture kits on eBay with fake skin and needles and how to sew up flesh. It's a weird thing to learn, but when you can't go to the emergency room and you have a bleeding wound, it'd be good to know how to sew up your own flesh. So those are my quick tips. The most important thing in preparing moving forward for grid down Stone Age conditions is, though 50% of the public has poor vision, stock up on your glasses, your prescriptions. You need a stockpile of glasses, contacts, or get LASIK surgery that you've been putting off. This is important, being able to see, to do the things you need to do to survive. And that's the most basic thing that I can cover, and I'm sure Lee has a lot to talk about on the Band-Aid front.
Yeah, so I recommend everybody has large supplies of aspirin. They have large supplies of antihistamines like Benadryl and things of that nature for people who have allergic reactions. So you have, as far as, lots of Band-Aids, and I recommend cloth-backed Band-Aids as opposed to the plastic back. They tend to stay on better. Lots of rubbing alcohol. Go for the higher percentage of that rubbing alcohol, and by doing that, you're getting a better disinfectant, but also you can use that rubbing alcohol as a fuel for heat if you have to, and for disinfecting and sterilizing things. Hydrogen peroxide, again, a higher level of that. Pure iodine or iodide. You don't, the red stuff they put on for disinfecting the wound. And then you can go out and spend a lot of money and buy trauma pads. But believe it or not, a menstrual pad works really good as a trauma pad. So if you don't have a lot of money and you want to stock up on those, just get a couple boxes of high flow pads or large flow pads, and then you can use those as your trauma pads. And believe it or not, there are poor countries around the world that their ambulances, that's what they carry, because they can't afford the ones from the medical supplies. So that's what they use, and they work great for gunshot wounds, for stab wounds, avulsions, what have you, for stopping the bleeding. And then you need lots of white square cloths that you can use for bandages for head wounds, that you can make for slings, for splints. Learn how to splint people's bones. Go to a Dollar General store and buy a bunch of 1 foot long rulers, and keep those, because they work great with an ACE bandage to splint a broken bone. So if you've got a broken leg or what have you, you can straighten out the bone the way it needs to be, put the rulers around the outside of it, put an ACE bandage over the outside of that, and support that to help that start to grow back. You need eye patches. You were talking about doing suturing. We have a stapler for dogs that get cut. So if you get a large wound, you can just pull up the skin and staple it really quick. It's actually a whole lot less painful than going through the suturing process. It's not as much fun when you got to take it back out, but it gets you stitched up really quick.
Get the galvanized staples. Rusty ones are the worst to take out.
Yeah, stainless steel is used. And then of course the iodine swabs, you can buy those. They're already for cleaning that out. Snake bite kit. There's one that actually has the razor blades in it. Has a small bottle of disinfectant, has the razor blades, and has little rubber boots. It looks like an oversized vitamin is what it looks like. It's actually about 1.5 inches long by about 1/2 to 3/4 of an inch wide, and it all comes apart. You can carry it in your pocket. It's a professional snake bite kit. And when we would deploy, everybody would carry them. And then just have your, a pair of scissors, scalpels for cutting things, like you said, things for sutures, and then whatever medical supplies you're going to need. And I highly recommend, lots of aspirin, lots of things like Benadryl, Excedrin, and then the backache pads that you can get and put on. Get those, and they work good for pulling muscles or wounds or whatever. You can put it on and help numb the pain down. And then lots of cotton balls and things of that nature, Q-tips for being able to clean up, and then rubber gloves for being able to do the surgeries or whatever you have to do on yourself or on your relatives or friends.
Amen. Leah, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I mean, definitely, certainly taking a course in field medicine can be really helpful. I took a quick course in field medicine and learned a bunch of little tricks about making tourniquets. I even learned how to make a chest seal that is not the medical version, but made inexpensively with plastic file folders. So you can pick up some great tips there. Lee, I'm so glad that you mentioned using menstrual pads, because that is something that I, in fact, learned in this course.
She doesn't stop talking about stockpiling these pads. We need pads, lots of pads, acres of them.
Well, it is a really great, inexpensive way, and it's something you can stock up on. And I would add to that for women, don't use them for menstruation. Save them for medical needs, because you can make menstrual pads out of fabric, and they can be washed, and that's perfectly doable. So they don't have to all be used up. I would also throw in there utilizing some veterinary supplies, such as fish mox, which is it's the fish version of amoxicillin. There's also Fish Pen, which is penicillin, and Fish Pro, which is the same as Cipro. And these things can be acquired easily. You can order them online. You don't have to go to a veterinarian to get them. Let's see, what else? Certainly iodine bandages, all of that stuff, incredibly important. We also like to talk, too, about there's lots of herbal remedies. So, and as an example, as an alternative to aspirin, willow can be used, as well as the toothache tree. Those are sort of the original natural aspirins. I mean, there's all kinds of mosses, and you can use plantain to make poultices for wounds. You can use colloidal silver. So if you have some land, it's really helpful to spend some time researching what it is that you can grow that will serve your medical needs. I mean, and certainly looking around online at other people's ideas for medical supplies is really helpful.
Yeah, I can't implore everyone enough listening to the radio show to do your own homework. The majority of people that watch our daily updates on the Grand Solar Minimum at Oppenheimer Ranch Project are not even aware where the links are. So you need to start to get familiar with how to use these resources to your advantage. Do not be embarrassed to ask someone how to show you how the computer works, because all the information you need is at your fingertips. Every question that you have, you just put into Google and ask it, like, what is the most important thing I need for this? Just ask the question, hit enter, and Google will answer it. People don't understand that that's how Google works, which sometimes blows my mind, but I just told you how it works. Ask Google any question, and you'll get the answer. Now, Lee, we've talked about beans, bullets, Band-Aids. What were your other two?
Communications and water.
Okay, so let's go a little deeper into water. What do you guys have set up there on your facility? We have cisterns here. What do you do there?
Well, what we currently have is a bunch of different wells. And so we are in the process of acquiring windmills to feed all of the tanks that we were talking about. We're designing all of that up now, where everything's going to go, where all of our pipes are going to go, and acquiring all of the equipment to run the plastic pipes. So we're going to have multiple tanks underground, and the windmill system will feed those tanks constantly. So it will feed one master tank, which is probably going to be in excess of 10,000 gallons. And then that tank will come out and come to a T, and then it'll go north and south about a half a mile in each direction, and it'll feed different, well, actually it's more than that. It's 3/4 of a mile to the north, half a mile to the south. But it'll go and it'll feed those other tanks. We're doing it all through gravity feed, and that way we have supplies of water at each of the residences and each one of the main structures. So we'll end up probably with at least 8 or 10 large tanks. And then what we're doing with those is when all of the tanks are full, their overflows will go into overflow ponds for irrigation. So you can either divert to the pond or you can divert through the field. So if you're the plants, if it's raining and the tanks are overflowing, then you put it in the pond. Otherwise, you can put it in the fields, and that way we can still irrigate, and we're doing everything off the windmill.
So these are mechanical agricultural windmills that generate electricity for the pump?
No. It is 100% mechanical. We do not use electricity on the pumps at all. We have other pumps that we're putting in the ground that will operate off of 48 volts DC. That way, when the grid goes down, we can power that with solar, or if we need to go to that well and we pull up on the golf cart that operates off 48 volts, we have an Anderson connector that'll carry 300 amps mounted on the front. You can plug it straight into the well off that golf cart, and it'll get you water straight out of that well. So you can go to any of the 8 wells and get water out of it from the vehicle. So any vehicle that can haul water can run the pump.
So where do you source the agricultural windmill, the mechanical one?
You can get those. There's two companies here in the United States that make them, and then there's a company that's making them. I think they're in New Zealand. They have a rotary pump. The ones in the United States, like Aero Motor, they use a piston pump with rubber seals that go up and down, whereas the windmill system that they're using in South Africa now is actually a rotary type pump, which, from what I understand, works really, really well. They just don't have a whole lot of them out there yet, so I'm still a little, how shall I say, reserved about using it, because that's a long way away if I have issues with warranty or what have you. Yeah. And also Aero Motor has been making them for almost 200 years. So
if it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Right, and they have worked for decades and decades and decades. So if you get an Aero Motor water pump and you get a couple of the rebuild kits for the pump, that's going to last you the rest of your life, and you can use the tower to pull the pump up too. That's the other great part about it. Whereas that normally if you got to replace a pump, you got to have a well truck come out to pull your pump. Whereas that with a windmill, you can actually pull your own with a come along or a chain hoist. So there's lots of advantages to doing it with a windmill, and you don't have the electric bill, and then at each one of the homes coming from the tank where the supply comes in, you can just take an RV water pump and supply the water for the house off 12 volts. That's again going back to the 12 volt basic power system. And you just take your water on demand, and you don't have to have that 110 volts and 60 pounds or 40 pounds or whatever have you on the system all the time. You can still put a surge pump in with it. You just lower the pressure on it. And you don't have as much flow. If you need more flow, you add a couple more pumps in parallel.
Well, it's amazing how prepared I thought I was. And then these last 3 weeks with you and with our other guests, it's amazing how much there is to know and how little time there is. I can't wait to get on these mechanical windmill research and to get some out here. Do you have a price point on these mechanical windmills?
I can't tell you what an Aero Motor. I mean, you're probably talking $10,000, I would expect. I haven't gotten to that yet. As far as the pricing, we're just going to pull the trigger on it when it's time to do it. What I was looking for is a 60-foot or whatever it costs. I've been more worried about the tanks and the lines under the ground and how much pipe I got to buy, as opposed to the windmill. But it should last you if you grease it like they tell you to. It should last for decades. I mean, I would expect 30, 40 years of service out of it easily.
Well, there's one in town here, right outside of town, that's a huge, probably the biggest one they make. It looks like it's been spinning since 1940. I mean, it is older than dirt and is working just properly.
Yeah, it was a great design, and we had them when I was a kid, and I loved them then. And now that this is coming to fruition, it's the best way to get water out of the ground. Make sure when you do that, get the additional kit that goes onto the bottom, so that if the wind's not blowing, you can manually still run the pump and get water.
On your bicycle?
No, it's a lever. It's a handle that sticks out the side of it, and you just.
It's a pump, so you hand pump it.
Yeah, you just hand pump it, and so there's an adapter. There's a kit that you can get to it, and it's not that much more money, and you just get that kit, and then when the windmill's not spinning, you can do that hand pump and get water. And you can probably get a gallon or two a minute out of it, and that's plenty for drinking water.
Perfect. So, Leah, do you have anything to add on this combo?
I'm just thinking that, we've talked about, since you mentioned hand pumping, we talked about just putting in some simple hand pumps into the ground as well, just for a quick, we need some water here. It's not something that's you're not going to be tapping into a large groundwater reserve, but as a backup, it might be a good idea.
Yeah, we have access to these cast iron hand pump wells at Tractor Supply for $50. And if you're in a floodplain, it's easy. You can just dig a hole 100 feet from the river and have flowing water for your garden through a hand pump. It's just old school, requires nothing to set up, and they cost $50. You just need water.
Right.
Now, Lee, we only have a few minutes left. I want to thank you. We have about 15 minutes left here. I want to thank you for joining us this month. It's been very eye-opening. And to sum it all up here in the last 15 minutes, I wanted to talk about logistics. For those groups that are preparing a compound, an area, a community, a place where they think that they're far enough to separate themselves from the insanity that's going to ensue, what are the logistics that we can glean from your military knowledge to make these communities successful? And what I mean by that is, what is the core number of people that you should have, a maximum or a minimum? In my eyes, I think like more than 10 or 12 people is too many to trust. And so a core group of between 5 and 8, that everyone knows every aspect of what's hidden and not hidden, so to speak, and that a total number of approaching 20 or 30 for the total community in the end, and not really extending above that because of the clickiness and the groups that can separate. Do you have any insight from your military experience on how it will unfold and what the best setup scenario, let's say power structure is, or any of that? Because I don't know.
Well, I would do it the same way that the Navy SEALs do it, in groups of like 6 to 8 men. And that is a group or a cell.
Okay.
And so you have one group here, you got another group there, you got another group here. And what I would do is I would try to, in each one of those groups, make sure that you had at least one member that was strong in each one of the fields that are required. So somebody that knows about nutrition, somebody that knows about medicine, somebody that knows about weapons, someone that knows about communications. And so you try to distribute your knowledge throughout all of your units, and then you cross-train all of the people in those units so as that everybody is capable of doing everything that everybody else is. And then you have a hierarchy. There's one leader in each one of those groups, and then that group comes back to whoever the captain or lieutenant or whoever it is that's in charge of 5 or 6 small groups. I think a group should never exceed 200 people as far as the maximum people working in an individual group, because it becomes unmanageable for the management.
Yeah.
And so you need to have like little, for lack of a better word, little factions or groups of clusters of anywhere from 6 to 200 people, and they have a representative and that representative can communicate with other groups to negotiate whatever they're going to do. I strongly emphasize using wind and water and solar for your power sources. If you can be near a stream and use hydroelectricity, that's a great way to go. Small hydro, or even hydro-mechanical, driving a belt, and that's driving something else, whether it's grinding your corn or what have you. And then using wind turbines, and you can pump water or make power from wind, and of course you make power from solar, and you can heat from your solar. I recommend people study an umbrella home and the science behind how an umbrella home works. And then if they're going to build a structure similar to a domen or what have you, which is what I would recommend everyone do, you can use the technology that we've gleaned from umbrella homes by using earth tubes for heating and cooling, solar for heating in the wintertime, shading for keeping the heat out in the summertime, putting your cold air side on the north side of the property, your hot air bed on the south side of the property, getting your water off of your roof for going into your cistern. So there's a lot of different things that you can learn from an umbrella home or underground homes that I would recommend everyone to learn about and incorporate within their plan. If you don't have the land to do that, then try to find somebody that lives down south or where have you, that does have some land that you can bring your bug out bus or your van or whatever it is there and set up and try to have that, because that's the great part about a bug out bus is wherever you stop, that can be home. You got solar panels on the top, you got batteries inside, you can use I've forgotten what it is, but take moisture out, a dehumidifier to take moisture out of the air to create drinking water. So, you need to look at all the different things that are available to you and then determine what is the best scenario for you and your family, because it's like a smorgasbord. All of us are going to go to the same place, but we're not going to take the same route. The same thing going through a smorgasbord. Everybody has the same food, but they're not going to come off the end of the line with the same food on their plate. So what works for some people will work for some people, will work for other people, will work for different people. So, you have to pick and choose what is best for you. What are your capabilities? And, what's your financial capability? What's your physical capabilities? Are you prepared? Will your family help you in this endeavor? And you need to try to explain what you're doing to your family so that they understand what's going on. Don't make it something that you're doing in the barn out back and you don't tell anybody else about it. You need to practice it, and then do weekends without power. Kill the power, go to the main breaker in the house. It'll save your electric bill and bring your family closer together. Cut the power off, take everybody's cell phones and going, all right, we're going to get our own water. We're going to make our own food. We're going to go gather wood. We're going to do all of it. It's practice. Do that once a month or once every 2 months just to keep your family, in practice, because, it's going to be a culture shock. I mean, they even talk about it being a culture shock just from people losing their iPhones, and not being able to have internet connectivity. Can you imagine when you don't have internet connectivity, you don't have electricity, you don't have water, you don't have fresh access to food, what are you going to do then? That's what we're here for, is to try to help you through that.
I love Lee Wheelbarger's badass bug out bus blasting through the barn door. Get in! I mean, It's a movie. It's an opening scene to the movie. Someone's going to call us on that. Leah, do you have any final closing statements?
Sure. I mean, we touched a little bit on practicing a lot of things, and I feel like that goes doubly, practicing and training for things, for security concerns, for firearms. If you're not familiar with firearms, you need to practice and train. You need to know all of the safety rules and exercise them and get into the habit of using them so that when you're in a tough situation, you don't screw up and shoot something that you don't intend to. Certainly, Lee, you've touched on this before. You've said this a couple of times. Buy as many books as you possibly can, and I couldn't agree with that advice any less. I mean, Books are an amazing resource. There's so many books on homesteading, and that information never goes out of style. And you can always get discount books at thrift stores. You can get library discards. I'll also plug thriftbooks.com. It's a huge clearinghouse of thrift books. Let's see, what else? Hit salvage and junkyards for any of the things that you might be wanting to build. And also we've talked quite a bit about, not so much today, but information control and protecting yourself. I mean, you want to carefully consider who you want to know what about what you're doing, and protect yourself that way. And I think that's about it.
Well, I can't thank you two enough for joining us on this journey. Those of you listening there are so many layers of the onion, and every week we discuss on the inconvenient truth about the events that will unfold in your future, prepping for the grand solar minimum. There are so many levels. And what was revealed to you tonight and revealed to us on the spot was the whole idea of downsizing your preparedness. Lee's idea of purchasing a bus and making that your project to get your family to safety is an excellent idea. He said the price point starts at $3,000 for a quality bus. If you retrofit it with all the gears and gadgets from this episode, which will be up on YouTube that you can listen to again and again, for under $10,000, you would have a completely contained super bug out system that is a mobile housing unit, and it is absolutely the way to go. You can't even purchase enough land to live on for that kind of price, and you simply need a place to go. And when a grid down situation happens, there are national parks, BLM land, there will be open spaces to get to. You need to be familiar with the country, the space you're in, and the topography, and you need to start traveling around and locating a safe space to take your bug out bus or however you do it. There are so many layers. Lee, do you have anything you want to plug before we close up tonight?
Well, just that, if they want to follow me, it's Lee Wheelbarger on Twitter, WHEELBARGER. And if you don't have a lot of money and you can build this bus, you can also get with other people in your community and go buy a piece of community property in a rural location so that you have a place to take the bus to, and maybe a couple of your friends or family would have buses as well as they can take. So that's something else that other people are doing as well. I wanted to inject that there before we ended the show.
Awesome, Lee. Thanks for joining us. I'm definitely going to have you back if that's all right with you.
Sure, anytime.
And guys, I want to throw out an idea out there for you. If you think you can't afford the $10,000, I bet you can find 5 like-minded people to go in on the bug out bus, and you do it as a project together. This would be very helpful because you're going to be building friendships in your community while you build your bus. Another option is if you're computer savvy, I bet you any amount of money in the future, we're going to see lots of Indiegogos and other types of crowdfunding where you can actually buy into the bug out bus community, where you're going to get groups of people that are all purchasing the bus together using social media. You need to think outside of the box, and we need to use technology to our advantage before the technology goes away. It's inedible, and in the cosmic environment we're heading into, all bets are off that technology will survive in the near term. We're talking in the next few decades, technology will be a thing of the past when we try to rebuild the infrastructure to handle the new cosmic environment that we're entering into. These things have not been thought out, and if they were thought out to fail on purpose. I don't know if it's population control. It doesn't matter who caused it, what the purpose is. We have the historical information and the scientific information that suggests with a very high probability that the future that we are living now is going to be epic. And it's going to include the complete failure of all of the systems that you are familiar with that make your life comfortable. So now is the time to start to learn about the ways of yore and learn your wildcrafting skills, learn your preparedness skills, start opening up your mind to new ways of thinking. In order to survive and thrive in the future, it is not going to be anything that you are currently living. It actually takes effort to homestead. And Leah and I have been doing it for years, and the amount of information that we need to learn is growing. It's not getting shorter. Leah, do you have any final words?
No, except that, developing a community that you can work with is extremely important, we both believe. And again, this requires picking and choosing who exactly you want to work with. But as Anita Bailey likes to put it, you have to sleep sometime, and it's not really all that feasible to do it all yourself. And that also means that if you have a community, especially if it's one nearby, you have people that you can trade goods and services with. As an example, we live in a river valley where we have people that have different animals that we do and different skills than we do. So we hope that in the future we will be able to work with community, and that will ensure our best chance of survival, hopefully.
Yeah, we're working with our community now. We've moved to a place where the community is surviving and thriving on bartering, and you should be locating similar people to do the same things we're doing here. You can follow us at the Oppenheimer Ranch Project on YouTube. You can find the Oppenheimer Ranch Project on Facebook, where we also have Facebook resources, Solar Shutdown, where we share all of the science related to the ongoing grand solar minimum and magnetic pole flip. And you can locate all this information and all of the links directly from our website, which is threecanyons.org or oppenheimerranch.org. Both of those resources are available and have all the links to Facebook,